Hello Wonderland, Kelly here. It is cold this morning. I'm in my backyard. It's about 22 degrees maybe Fahrenheit. So yeah, chilly. But I had an idea. I wanted to show you guys the difference between the new AI Denoise in Lightroom and the DxO Pure RAW 3 that I've been using lately. So I thought I would come out today with the R5 and the 800mm f11 lens and do some backyard birding. They're around. I hear a woodpecker and I've seen a bunch of other little birds. So yeah, I'm going to try to get some shots. This is f11, so I'll have to crank the ISO up a bit because I want to get some birds in motion, hopefully. So I'll need a high shutter speed, fast shutter speed. Yeah, so I'll crank the ISO up a bit as well, and we'll see how things clean up. We also took a little excursion yesterday to a reptile museum, and I got some shots there with the R5 and the 100mm macro mostly, and those I cranked the ISO up quite a bit as well. So should have a good suite of sample images to show you the difference between unprocessed or undenoised, denoised with Lightroom, and denoised with DxO Pure RAW 3. So we'll see how that works out. But in the meantime, the birds are coming back. I just restocked some feeders and they know it. So yeah, we'll see what we can get here. Hopefully some good birds in flight. I'm not good at that. And I'm going to try it on the gimbal today. So maybe I'll go handheld at some point, but still, see how it goes. Okay, stay tuned. One actually kind of sad note. I'll move over here so you can see the chickens. Hopefully it's following me. But yeah, we have backyard chickens. And one of them yesterday was attacked by a hawk out here. Pretty sure that's what happened. We didn't see it, but it was all cut up around the head. Hasn't opened her eyes again yet, so I'm hoping the eyes are okay. We've got her inside recuperating, but a little scary. I love hawks and stuff, so it's kind of a bummer when something like that happens. It's the circle of life, right? That's what nature does, but leave my chickens alone. Okay, hopefully she'll be all right. I see birds. Time to shoot. I don't know if I got too much, but even with gloves, my hands are freezing. So I'll call it there. Mostly the usual suspects out here. We've got our chickadees, titmice, some sparrows, dark-eyed juncos, who are a winter visitor. They come down from the mountains. Lots of cardinals. A batch of eastern bluebirds showed up. That was cool. Some wrens, finches, woodpeckers. I get a good variety here in the backyard. They come out of the woods, and you'd think I'd be able to spot them in the trees and get them to come towards me, or shoot them as they come towards the feeders. But so far I'm not good at birds in flight. And I think the problem is you've got to anticipate or predict when they're going to take off into flight. So you focus on one on a perch or a feeder, you can either keep holding the shutter down and hope they fly off, or try to anticipate that moment, and that's tough. So I don't think the R5 has the pre-shooting mode like some newer Canons do. I'm sure the R5 Mark II will. I think 1 second is the rumor of pre-shoot on that, so I think that'll make things easier. The R7 might have it. I'll have to check that out. But that would help if you could press the shutter right after the bird takes off and capture those frames just before that. So we'll see. So I don't usually like to use high-speed shutter mode because I don't like to pare through 1,000 pictures after a shoot, unless I was out all day. Okay, yeah, cold, I'm watery. I'm gonna go inside, see what happens. All right, back at my desk. It's been a few days since I was out in the backyard, and actually the day before that, I might have mentioned we went to a reptile museum not too far away from here. So I have some shots from both of those excursions, the museum and the backyard, to compare noise reduction between Lightroom Classic that I'm using and DxO PureRAW 3. So let me switch to the computer. Let me begin recording. And yes, okay. So I'm in Lightroom Classic. I've kind of narrowed it down to about 9 or 10 images that I shot between the museum and the backyard. So I'm going to jump in here. So here is a lovely chameleon at the Reptile Museum. And this was shot at ISO 8000. I was using pretty much exclusively the 100mm f2.8 macro RF lens on the R5 for this excursion. So ISO 8000 with that combo, and if I zoom in, this is unedited RAW, so you can really see the grain and noise all back here. This is 100% zoom. And you can see the noise is pretty uniform across, and there's not a lot of detail here around the eye, which is where I was focused. So yes, that's what we're dealing with, right? So if I run it through, which I already did, the Lightroom Classic noise reduction and edit the result, I get this. And this looks pretty good. Let me start, let me zoom in that same spot. So you can really see the background noise cleaned up quite a bit. And all of these for Lightroom, there's only really one slider to adjust the strength of the denoise. And I've got these all between 50 and 70%. I feel like that's about the sweet range for good noise reduction without losing or smoothing too much of the detail and texture. So I forget exactly what setting I use for each of these, but it's all between 50 and 70. Keep that in mind. All right. So if I zoom in here with the Lightroom Classic noise reduction, you can see obviously the background noise pretty much gone. That looks pretty good to my eye. And details around here, I still feel like this is a little too smooth. It's maybe a touch overexposed. You can see the highlights are a little clipped around some of these areas, so that could be my fault. But it's not bad. It's not bad, and especially if you're looking, you know, at a more zoomed out. Yeah, things look pretty good. But if we compare that to the DxO PureRAW, and you can see as I switch between these, a little bit of distortion, and DxO RAW does that by default. You know, it has profiles for each camera and lens combination, and it applies whichever one you used. So it has a profile for the RF 100 lens, and that's that little bit of distortion compensation that you're seeing there. So if I zoom in here, cleaned up a bit, and to me, and I don't know how well this is coming across at 1080p on YouTube, but there's more texture in these scales to me, a little more detail. The background still looks good. Background noise is pretty easy to clean up, so everything does that pretty well. Where I'm concerned is preserving and even enhancing the detail of the subject. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm focusing on here. So yeah, if you compare this claw to the other, this is Lightroom. Not seeing a lot of texture in there, although the noise looks good. But DxO, noise is gone, and the texture to me looks more realistic. So that's a fairly good baseline for my opinion. Between, if you stop watching right here, that's kind of my conclusion, right? Lightroom's noise reduction does a really good job, but DxO a little bit better as far as enhancing and preserving detail, because it adds a little bit of sharpness as well. So maybe in Lightroom, what I did here basically was I edited first the DxO version and applied that same set of corrections to the DNG Lightroom's noise reduction generated. So, and in some cases the exposure is not exactly the same. I could probably add some sharpening to this and bring out more of that detail. So, you know, grain of salt on all of this. And the bottom line comes down to what you're comfortable using and how much money you're comfortable spending, right? So, yeah. Next image. This lovely snake. And I apologize if there are any snake phobes in the audience, but I like them. Alright, so this again is the unedited raw image. Pretty good sharpness here. You can tell from the lens, you know, just by looking at it. That's a damn sharp lens, so it better be good. But obviously noisy. This is at ISO 4000 and 1/80th of a second. So, and that's kind of a tip when you're shooting in a low light environment. A faster exposure at a higher ISO kind of works out to the same as a slower shutter speed at a lower ISO. Just it's the amount of light and noise that you're generating kind of is the same either way. So if you need to crank the ISO higher, but you can get a faster shutter speed, might still be good to do rather than getting away with a lower ISO and a slower shutter speed. Does that make sense? Anyway, all right, we continue. So this looks okay. This is, well, it looked noisy, but the image looked good. All right, so this is Lightroom's noise reduction, and here again, once that sharpens up a little, you can kind of see noise looks good. Background noise is gone for the most part. That looks swell to me. These cleaned up pretty well, the scales on the head here. But again, they don't seem to have a lot of texture to me. And if I go to DxO, sharpen up a little, there again, you just, that bit of extra sharpness and texture is in there for me right out of the box. And that I like. Next subject is this guy, an iguana. Oops. Okay, there we go. I'm trying to move around, not to, oh well, there you go. All right, anyway. Yeah, so obviously here again, I'm focused around the eye. This is the unedited RAW, and this is ISO 4000. So again, noise, not terrible. Shutter speed of 1/80th, so about the same as the last one. Lightroom cleans it up well. There, sharpened up a little. And you can see that the scale detail around the eye is really what I'm looking for here. So yeah, that looks pretty decent. If I go to DxO though, again, that extra bit of crispness for me, the extra sharpness, extra detail is just there. And lastly, from the Reptile Museum is this guy. Very cute. Okay, this is again unedited. This is only ISO 1600 and 1/100th of a second, so the noise isn't too bad. And in fact, Lightroom's own non-AI noise reduction slider would probably clean this up fairly well. But for the sake of argument, I ran it through the AI denoise, and here's what we get there. And again, that looks to me very good. Yeah, this one cleaned up really well, I think. So I would be happy with that. And then DxO, a little tiny bit crisper. And especially here in the nose, you can kind of see this looks a little fuzzy to me, whereas DxO sharpened it up a bit more. Yeah, so maybe not apples to apples. If I could add more sharpness in Lightroom, which I could, might be able to duplicate that same result. But I'm just a fan of what DxO produces, so I'm happy with that. All right, to the backyard, what I got earlier in this video. So this is a red-bellied woodpecker, a male, on one of my raggedy fence posts. And again, this is unedited RAW. This is 10,000 ISO, believe it or not, but a shutter speed of only 1/2000th of a second. So the background is bright enough that you hardly even see that noise out there. But on my subject here, You can just see the noise eating away at the detail, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's what we would want to clean up. So here's Lightroom's job at cleaning it. And for birds, what I always tend to look for is these individual hairs in the feathers, and the scales around the eyes. I like to be nice and sharp as well. This looks pretty good. But this is DxO. And again, just that extra bit of detail. Next up, we have a little Carolina Wren. I like these guys. They're a lot of fun to watch. This is ISO 8000, 1/1000th of a second. And here, by the way, I was using the R5 and the 800mm f11. Yeah. So I'm at f11 for all these. Yeah. So obviously 8000, pretty noisy. And here, even in the background, it's pretty obvious because it's a little bit darker of an image, a little underexposed. So Adobe cleans it up like this. Start in the background. That looks pretty darn good to me. And our little birdie friend looks good. Not a lot of detail around here. DxO brings out more of that. You could even call this a little over sharpened. But I still think that looks pretty good. Yeah, I like that one. Here we have a robin, American robin. Yeah, this is only ISO 1250, so again, you could really just use Adobe's Lightroom non-AI luminance slider to clean up the background and then sharpen the bird up a bit, because he looks pretty good, actually. But again, for the sake of argument, this is Lightroom's noise reduction. Really good detail around the eye and these feathers. The extra light on this subject helps quite a bit with that. And these little chin hairs over here, I like to see that as well. So that looks pretty good to me. This is DxO. Sharpening. Here. And yeah, you could really see that pop in, I think. All this extra feather detail. So yeah, hopefully you can see why I'm a fan of the DxO here. A couple more. But that batch of bluebirds that showed up, I enjoyed them. And this is ISO 16000, so this is the highest that we've used so far. Checking out one of my nest boxes. I hope they move in. That would be great. But yeah, 16000 ISO, you can see a lot of noise. The wood grain, pretty soft. Bird detail, pretty noisy. So we go to Lightroom, noise reduction, and sharpen that up a little. And that looks decent, right? A little bit better in the wood grain. Some feather detail pop in there. Background, of course, looks good. And DxO. And again, more of that eye scales. A little bit more feather detail. Not a big difference in these two, I don't think. That's Lightroom, and that's DxO. So you can see the extra sharpening, but otherwise, not bad. And finally, a female northern cardinal. Side lighting is nice on this one. I can tell the lens got to focus very good on this. I'm seeing lots of good detail that could be brought out. This is ISO 4000. So Lightroom did this. That detail pop in. There you go. And that looks pretty good, right? I like these individual scales around the eye. Your crest is looking good. Nice claws. Not bad at all. And DxO. Again, that bit of extra sharpening around the eye and the feathers. And that almost to me does look a little over sharpened. But again, at a smaller, zoomed out, that looks pretty good. Mostly you're not pixel peeping on these, right? Yeah, and that's it. My little comparison of Adobe Lightroom's AI Denoise, which And both of these methods basically take your raw file, denoise it, and generate a new DNG file that you're playing with instead. If one of the pros of doing it within Lightroom is that if you've already tagged or edited or added to Smart Collection, Quick Collection, that kind of thing, your new DNG will get all those attributes by default. Whereas with DxO, you're sending it out to DxO, then bringing it back in as a newly imported DNG, basically. And you have to start all over with the tagging and everything for those images, which is why I tend to do my tagging at the end. Yeah, we'll do more Lightroom stuff as time goes by, don't you worry. But yeah, hopefully that was a good look at this. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, of course. Price-wise, I'm paying, what, $10 a month for the Adobe Creative Cloud Photographers combo, which is Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, and Photoshop, basically. And Camera Raw is thrown in there as well, but I don't use that. And I hardly use Photoshop. I really do most everything within Lightroom and whatever other applications I can export from Lightroom and bring back into Lightroom. I don't do a lot of layer stuff. I don't do a lot of replacement. Though I would love it if Lightroom would get the generative fill that they've added to Photoshop. That would be cool in a lot of circumstances, because its own clone, heal, and now it has a content-aware fill tool, but it doesn't really work very well. So that, focus stacking, and like exposure stacking for fireflies and astrophotography, if it would add those three things, I would probably need to use nothing else but Lightroom Classic. It's good. Alright, I'll call it there. Again, questions, let me know. Like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, be good to yourself. Take care of each other. Don't forget to be awesome. Get out and wander. Later.